The press has long been described as the fourth estate, a powerful institution that stands alongside the three formal branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Its purpose is not ceremonial. It exists to hold power accountable, to question authority, to investigate wrongdoing, and when necessary, to challenge the actions of those in control. A free and independent press is one of the strongest safeguards of democracy. But that role becomes impossible when those in power attempt to restrict, control, or silence it. Today, we are witnessing a major legal and constitutional confrontation that goes to the heart of that principle. A breaking development from a federal court in Washington, D.C., has sent a strong message about the limits of government power and the importance of press freedom under the First Amendment. A senior federal judge, Judge Friedman, has ruled that the Pentagon, under the Trump administration, violated a prior court order by restricting journalists' access. This ruling is not just about access badges or building entry. It is about whether the government can control how journalists gather information and report it to the public. The controversy began when several journalists, including reporters from the New York Times, were effectively pushed out of the Pentagon. Their credentials were withheld, and even when access was theoretically granted, it came with strict and unprecedented conditions. Reporters were told they could not freely move within the building, could not ask certain types of questions, and could only enter with escorts. He emphasized that the press is meant to serve the public, not the government. Its role is to inform citizens, expose wrongdoing, and ensure transparency. Without it, democracy itself is weakened. The judge also cited historical interpretations of the First Amendment, including the idea that the press must be free to criticize the government and reveal its secrets when necessary. This freedom is not optional. It is essential. In an earlier ruling, Judge Friedman had already blocked a 12-page Pentagon policy that imposed restrictions on journalists. That policy required reporters to accept limitations on where they could go, what they could ask, and how they could gather information. The judge made it clear that such restrictions were unconstitutional. However, instead of complying with the spirit of that ruling, the Pentagon introduced a revised policy that was, in many ways, even more restrictive. It was implemented quickly, and at the same time, the Pentagon shut down the Correspondence Corridor, a key workspace where journalists traditionally carried out their reporting duties. Officials attempted to justify this move by claiming they were creating a new space for reporters in the future. But critics, and ultimately the court, saw this as an attempt to sidestep the judge's order. Promises of a new facility, vague timelines, and minimal amenities did little to address the core issue. Journalists were being denied meaningful access. The New York Times returned to court, arguing that the Pentagon was violating the injunction. They filed a motion to compel compliance, asking the judge to enforce his earlier ruling. Judge Friedman agreed. In his strongly worded opinion, he rejected the government's arguments and made it clear that simply changing the wording of a policy does not make it constitutional, if the underlying intent remains the same. He wrote that courts are not required to accept dubious interpretations of their orders, especially when those interpretations are clearly designed to evade compliance. In this case, the judge concluded that the Pentagon's actions were a deliberate attempt to undermine the court's directive. One of the most significant aspects of the ruling is the judge's finding that the policy amounted to viewpoint discrimination. This means the government was attempting to control not just access, but also the type of reporting that could occur. Such discrimination is strictly prohibited under the First Amendment. The judge further noted that the sudden closure of the Correspondence Corridor and the requirement for journalists to be escorted were not legitimate security measures. Instead, he described them as transparent efforts to neutralize the impact of the court's earlier decision. Importantly, the judge clarified that the goal of his injunction was not merely to ensure that journalists possessed physical badges. The real objective was to restore meaningful access, to allow reporters to do their jobs effectively. As a result, the court ordered the government to immediately return full access to the journalists. There are growing concerns that certain government officials are attempting to reshape press access, replacing traditional journalists with partisan voices, and influencers who may not adhere to the same standards of accountability. The implications of this shift are profound. If access to information is controlled, if questions are limited, and if only favorable narratives are allowed, then the public is no longer receiving a full picture of what is happening within government institutions. The courtroom battle over Pentagon access is just one example of this broader trend. But it is also a powerful reminder that the Constitution provides mechanisms to challenge such actions. The judiciary plays a critical role in this system. When the other branches overstep their authority, courts have the power and the responsibility to intervene. In this case, Judge Friedman has done exactly that, reinforcing the principle that no one, not even the government, is above the Constitution. At its core, this case is about accountability. It is about ensuring that those in power cannot operate in secrecy or silence dissenting voices. It is about protecting the flow of information that allows democracy to function. The decision also sends a message beyond the Pentagon. It signals to government agencies everywhere that attempts to restrict press freedom will be closely scrutinized and, if necessary, struck down. For journalists, this ruling is a victory, but also a reminder of the challenges they face. Reporting is not just about writing stories. It is about asking difficult questions, seeking truth, and sometimes confronting powerful institutions. For the public, it is a reaffirmation of a fundamental right, the right to know. As the situation continues to develop, one thing remains clear. The strength of a democracy is measured not by how it treats those in power, but by how it protects those who challenge it. The First Amendment is not just a line in a document. It is a living principle that requires constant defense. And in moments like this, when it is tested, the response of the courts and the vigilance of the people becomes more important than ever.